Welcome to this webinar hosted by the REC and undertaken by Kevin Butler, CEO of Centigy, the REC partner specializing in helping members navigate their technology needs and their negotiations. Kevin has worked with many clients helping reduce their technology costs, and most notably for a recruitment company being a 77% reduction in cost that equates to a staggering £120,000 reduction in the overall cost of that chosen service. Our aim today will be to provide practical information to help you, the REC member, get the best possible deal from your recruitment technology providers. We will outline some various considerations when negotiating with software vendors, such as what's the global trends, the length of contract term, the suitability of technology on offer, the relationship with the said supplier, and the basics of negotiating the deal, including leverage, ownership, and sunsetting. So without further ado, Kevin, can you please give us some insight into the global trends for recruitment technology?
Happy to do so, Richard. Nice to be here. Thanks for having me. Before I do, just a quick one on those numbers that you mentioned earlier, 120K overall. It was 120K every year, right? It's an annual recurring.
Oh, wow.
So that's as long as the contract goes on. So I think that the number will be a bit higher than that, but 77% is, yeah, it's ambitious, right? I wouldn't say we'll be able to do it for everyone, but it's possible, right? It certainly is possible. Okay, so trends in recruitment technology right now. Well, number one would be the barrier to entry, right? It's never been easier. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's never been easier to switch, right? To try some new tech. There's a number two, rise in AI recruitment tools, which are delivering unprecedented levels of efficiency gains. And with the rise in AI, an AI and machine learning, whatever you want to call it, it's basically outsourcing decisions, hiring decisions, right? And you need to make sure that those decisions are fair. So we will see regulation coming in. So number three is there's going to be regulation of recruitment technology, and that's coming very early next year. It's already started in the US, but you'll hear more about that another time.
Brilliant. And so things are changing, and that's really fascinating. Change is always a catalyst for things, isn't it? But when we talk about that, and you talked about the ongoing savings of £120,000 a year for that particular contract you talked about earlier on. What's the sort of average length of contract term for tech? And should our listeners be thinking shorter, longer terms? What's your advice on that?
It's a good question. And as any good consultant will tell you, it depends, right? But in most cases, for the customer, right, for you, the recruiters, it's best to have the least amount of risk as possible within a contract, and that is a lower term. So a 12-month contract would be preferable, right, on good terms as well, of course, right? It's not just about the number. The terms of the contract are important. But there are exceptions, right? There are exceptions where a 3-year contract or slightly more, but I wouldn't go much more than 3 years, would be more favorable than a 1 year, right? For example, this is good new tech that has been verified by a third party. You've got assurances that it's not going to fall foul of any regulations that are coming, these AI regulations that I mentioned to you about. So it'll be around, you're getting a great deal, and nothing's going to change, but there's still uncertainty, right? But those scenarios rarely happen, right? Where you're getting this absolutely cracking deal for 3 years. It's best to sign 12-month contracts.
And I mean, across the globe at the moment, I mean, there's a lot of trend to switch. I've got this service, and if I switch, I go to another, I might be able to, play one against the other to get a cheaper rate and things like that. Does that mean the same? Is that the same with this type of technology that we're talking about? Should people be looking to switch regularly and switch service providers, or are there sort of limitations on the suitability of products?
Another good question. So it's not the same as in the consumer world, where you can switch your telephone provider and there's very little of an impact on you, right? Because you're not relying upon them. It's more transactional. But as a recruiter, running a business, you need partners. You need partners that support you, and it takes time for that partnership to bed in. So I'm not advocating for switching every 12 months, because really I think that would be a bit of a nightmare, because you have to go through the selection process, and you really need to get under the hood, and it takes time, and you need to have your best people on this, right? You're going to take the best people out of their day jobs to be in vendor selection for 3-6 months, maybe a year, it depends, right? And these projects usually take longer than expected, because everybody has a day job to do. It's in your best interest, in everyone's best interest, to maintain a partnership for as long as possible.
I think it also probably depends on what you're looking at within the tech stack, doesn't it? Because if you're looking at something like a CRM or talking in my dinosaur name, a database, that's a massive undertaking to switch that. Whereas switching a tech supplier that aggregates adverts on job boards and things like that is less complex. And so I think it does depend on the service as well. Would you agree?
I completely agree. A CRM is, it's like a central nervous system in organizations. So, and it's not just a small part of your organization that will be using that. It'll extend to other departments, right? So sales and delivery will use a CRM. But some recruitment tools are kind of easy to switch, right? Proactive sourcing tools and things like that. But you're only going to get the real value out of it once it's embedded and you know how to use it. You're taking ownership of it, right? And it's got all those integrations which take time, right? Integrations with existing systems that you've got in place. So again, the longer that relationship goes on, the more value your supplier should be providing to you, and the more the value that tool is going to deliver for your business.
And the relationships are really key, aren't they? Because the relationship with the supplier, and sometimes they can be quite odd. You might like the individual, but you're unhappy with the actual technology, or vice versa. So when you're looking at advising recruiters about what does good tech look like, what's a good relationship between the tech company and the provider and the recruiter, what sort of indicators would you advise people to keep an eye out for?
That's a good scenario you mentioned there, which is you like the person but not the tech, right? Well, in that case, maybe he should go and work. She should go move to somewhere else. That's a better technology stack. But joking aside, the flip side of that is that you love the technology and it's delivering value, but you've had a problem with some of the service, right? And that can be a huge driver for change, right? And that can happen a lot. And in that situation, I would advise you to use that as a lever for negotiating, and it's a condition of your assigning the renewal that you have a different account management team or a direct line to a director or something like that going forward. So there's ways to recover scenarios like that. Well, indicators of a good relationship, right? Indicators of a good relationship. Number one, or a good supplier, for me, I'm not going to go through an extensive list here, is them having a real customer success team, right? A real customer, not just a customer success that's just a badged customer services team. They need to be invested in your business's success, right? And a quick kind of history lesson on how we've got from customer services to customer success. In the past, we had perpetual licenses, right? You sign a main contract and you would pay maintenance every year, or longer licenses than we have now, 3, 4, 5 year contracts. Now 12-month contracts are quite common. And because we're all practically on a 12-month contract, the chances of you switching, which we just talked about, are quite high. So they want to make sure that you're happy all of the time. No longer are you signing a contract and you don't hear from your supplier until it comes to renewal time, right? They're not delivering any value there. And if they're not delivering value, then this tool is probably not delivering any value, which means your business is losing value, right? Now, customer success teams are invested in your success, right? They'll run utilization reports. They'll make sure you're using the right parts of the tool. They'll educate you, train you on how to use it, how to get the best out of it, and work with you on integrations. So that if your business thrives, well, guess what? You're probably going to need more licenses, right? So everybody wins in that scenario. So yeah, a real customer success team, like yeah, sign me up, right? Yeah, that's the first question I'd ask.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because we're purchasing the technology, but actually we're going to judge it on well, A, the functionality, but B, the service levels that we get from the teams as a result. And you're quite right, investing in the success of both businesses. And it's interesting, we talk about relationship, but it's more of a partnership, and a purchasing involved. One of the things that comes up a lot is people when they're purchasing something, and you touched on this earlier about the strength of position that people are in. We often underestimate that position of either strength or weakness. And if we get down to the real nitty gritty of it, it's about the negotiation is understanding that strength and weakness. And I think the first thing is kind of understanding those strengths. What sort of leverage do we have? What sort of tips and considerations should members have in their minds when they're starting these negotiations, or have in their minds when they come and talk to you about helping them with their negotiations? What sort of tips would you give them?
So I would start by asking the question, should we renew, right? But in this scenario, we'll assume that you're happy with the tech, and you will be happy for the next couple of years. It's suitable for you now. It's suitable for what your business goals are, in the near distant future. So we're now in the we want to negotiate, right, situation. But you have to ask that question: should you, right? So let's give some insights into what goes on behind the scenes at a software vendor. I've worked in tech for software vendors for 20 years or so, right? So I've been responsible for negotiating on their behalf with clients, hundreds and hundreds of contracts over the years. So here's what's happening, right? And here's some of the pressures that they're under. This is their Q4. We're in November now, right? When this is recorded, this is their Q4. But this applies for any Q4, right? Depending on which way their financial year is aligned. Everyone in there, most people in a tech vendor, they carry a quota, right? They have to hit that target. They're either behind target, on, or they're exceeding their target, right? But they're all motivated to do more, right? And the higher up that you are in the organization, the more pressure you're going to be under. At the very top end of it, if you don't deliver on what you promised, there might be a change in leadership, right? And there's a lot of pressure and stress going on in software vendors. Usually it's fine, right? But this time of year, there's a lot of uncertainty, right? It's November. We've got 6 weeks until we close the books, and tech firms, people know this, right? This is not really a secret. This is the best time of year to negotiate with them, right? So a lot of savvy people wait until now to negotiate the deals because they know this is the time when you can get the best possible deal. Because they're under pressure. They have to close their books. They need to get this over the line. But what else is happening, right? Your value, your strength. What's the purpose of what's the main goal and objective of software vendors, right? It's to increase the value and exit, right? And this will happen many times for a software vendor. Increase that value and exit. And the valuation of software vendor can be about roughly, it could be around 10 times the annual recurring revenue. Around about that. Some less, some more, right? But 10 is certainly possible. So just think, right? If your renewal contract is worth 10K, as an example, that's worth 100K to them. That's 100K to their valuation. So no matter what deal you sign with them, it's good for them, right? So that's why you'll see potentially huge discounts, depending on the value of the deal. What else is happening around about this time of year for them? There could be a change of the account management team. in January, February, March, right? They start building their go-to-market strategy around then. They probably put the bones of it together now, right? But really all the focus is on closing out the year. But come Q1, there might be a new go-to-market strategy, which might mean that the team that support you right now might be looking after a different region of the UK or Europe, or they might go into verticals or something like that, right? So they kind of shuffle the pack. Some people move to the competition, others get promoted. So everything kind of moves around in software organizations. And that means that in January, the people dealing with your renewal might not get paid on it at all, right? Mm-hmm. So they don't close it in December, they might not get paid in it. Some do. There's grandfathering rules, which means they might get 50% of the deal. But it goes into next year's target, not this one, right? And everybody is really focused on making sure that they close out as big a deal as possible, or a higher number as possible this time of year, right? So every deal counts. Your size, some other kind of levers here, the size of your business, what's happening in the future? Are you growing? Are you going to need more licenses next year and the year after that? The need for more licenses puts you in a very strong position to negotiate. This is probably one of the key levers. So how many licenses do you need? Can you maximize on that, right? If you think you need 10, what about the next 12 months? Can we bump that up to 20 and maybe a sign now, pay later type of approach, right? Or what way can you negotiate that? Because you can trigger volume discount once you hit a certain amount of licenses. So yeah, these are some of the kind of levers we can pull on. But the most important thing here, with all of this that you're armed with now, right? So you know that you're valuable. They're not going to walk away from any deal. They're not, right? Because they're all worth 10 times the value that you assign. You need to have a good justification, right? Justification is absolutely key here. Your account manager can probably sign off up to 10%, his or her manager 20%, and so on up to the CEO, which will probably trigger her or him at 85% and above, right? So the justification gets a little bit longer the further up the chain you go, and they will all resonate with various different things. So having that solid justification and sticking to that game plan is important. And if rather than go through a few scenarios now, Richard, that might only apply to a handful of people, I would offer to anyone who's watching this now, give me a call and I'll review your deal and I'll build you a game plan, right? And it's not going to cost you anything to go through the deal review, and we can either point you in the right direction, you can run with the game plan, or I can negotiate on your behalf, right? But give me a call now. My number should be on the screen now, or if not, at the end of this recording, you'll have my details.
That's super, thank you. And just, we'll come back with the contact details and things at the very end as well. But just, it's really interesting just to understand, it's not just about the leverage that you have, but about understanding the business structure and the ownership and the considerations and that sign-off structure that you talked us through. That's really interesting. Particularly in the extra power that gives the members that are listening to this. One of the things that we have said a couple of times, and just for clarification, because it's terminology wise, it's about sunsetting. What is it is the first simple question, but then also what is it? What should members watch out for as part of their negotiations?
So sunsetting, if you've never heard of this, it sounds wonderful, right? It sounds lovely. Oh, balmy days on the beach, right? But it's anything but that, right? It's the discontinuation of technology for whatever reason. And there are many different reasons. It could be that the business is going in a different direction, strategic direction, which is translated as this piece of technology is not profitable, and therefore we're going to focus on more profitable areas of the business. Unfortunately, sometimes that can be really good tech that they sunset, that you rely upon. There's regulations coming, right? I mentioned there earlier, I won't go into too much detail about that, but some recruitment technology will be prohibited in the future, and a lot of it will be high risk. So if it's prohibited, it will have to be switched off, right? And prohibited is tech that we know will cause harm to types of people, to some people. And that kind of harm is only hiring the majority, right, in each country, and overlooking minorities. So we know that some people's livelihoods might be affected by this. It could be prohibited in that situation, right? So what are reasons why it would be sunset? This one happens a lot. The developer no longer works with the company, right? Developer no longer works there for whatever reason, right? They could be illness, or they could go to the competition, or whatever. And sometimes there's only one person that writes a lot of the code for the tech that you use. So there are some points of failure, right? But without going through all the lists, sunsetting is something we need to look out for. How could you look out for it? If it's coming to its end of life, if the tech's coming to its natural end of life, it'll probably be on the market for years. You're running it for well over 5-6 years, and you haven't got any roadmaps whatsoever, right? At least in the last couple of years. So here's an indicator that something might be sunset. Ask for roadmaps, the technology roadmap. What new releases? What was released last year? How many of them were there? Were they just break fixes, or was there any innovative new tech that they've introduced, right? And what's planned for the year, the next year, 2023? Is it again looks kind of a bit more reactive than there's actual investment going into R&D? If there's investment going into R&D and they're singing from the rooftops about that, it's more of a safe bet. It's less risky, right? So these are the kind of things you'd want to look for.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that when we've purchased technology, and one of the things I always insist on is that investment roadmap for the duration of the contract. And holding them to account, regular reports, regular reviews. So how it's not just the service level reviews that we've had, you have with technology, technology providers. It's also about when is the next thing that they've promised? When is that next widget or gizmo that's going to improve the service that they put into their roadmap? When is it going to appear, and how is it doing on track? Some awkward questions for them, because they don't like to be held to account, but at the same token, they're held to account by the contract. And that's really interesting. I think for now we've kind of covered the basics, and we've managed to introduce Centigy to the members. Is there anything you want to add, Kevin, before we just wrap up?
Well, I hope that the information and insights I've given you from working in tech for 20 years will help you negotiate. And if you want, as I mentioned earlier, get in touch with me. You have my details, and let's see. We can get these deal reviews done in a day or two, and it could save you significant money to invest elsewhere in your business.
Well, that's music to everybody's ears, I'm sure, Kevin. And thank you. It's been fascinating. We are, I'm sure, much more aware now than we were half an hour ago. And there will be some more information, possibly another webinar coming out when we talk about the artificial intelligence regulation, which will be great. And we're going to invite Kevin to come and join us on that. But I'll reiterate, if any of the listeners would like to contact Kevin for further details, or take up his very kind offer of a review, you can find the company details and Kevin's details on the REC website and in our member only offers and discounts area. So please take a look, have a look at Centigy in more detail. And from now, thank you very much, Kevin, and cheerio, everybody.
Thanks, Richard.